Yeah, this is the National Weather Service in Muskegon.
We've been chasing lights all over down that way. 3 to 4 lights, going at a high rate of speed, up and down and all over the sky.
What did I see that night? What did I see going 72,000 miles per hour at least?
1994년 3월 8일 저녁 9시 미시간주에서 동시다발적으로 신고가 접수됩니다.
I grew up in Muskegon, which is in West Michigan.
On March 8th, 1994, I was 29 going on 30. I had been at the Muskegon National Weather Service for 3 years at that point, and I was alone on duty for the night, which is not unusual. So it was a very fair, clear, cold night.
잭이 혼자 근무 중이던 저녁 시간 22km 떨어진 그랜드 헤이븐에서 알 수 없는 물체가 목격되기 시작합니다.
Was in the basement watching TV downstairs on the couch. It was about 9 o'clock at night. That's when I saw the lights. But I thought it was a huge full moon. I did a double take. No, I saw 4 lights. That can't be a full moon. So I said, Edna, I think there's a UFO in my backyard. They were just above our tree line in our pasture. It was starting to slowly move, and it was gone. It was just gone in a flash. So then I'm left with 3. I never saw a ship or ships. I watched them totally for about a half hour. We didn't have cell phones. What surprised me most was there was no sound from the UFO.
이어 그랜드 헤이븐에서 35km 떨어진 홀랜드에서도 이는 똑같이 목격되었죠.
Daryl and I had retired to bed, and the kids were in the living room. Joey started screaming, you know, you gotta see this. Come in here, you gotta see this. Our whole living room was like a spotlight.
911.
It looks like a string of Christmas lights that's way up in the sky. Wow, you might want to have somebody take a look. It's different. I've never seen anything like it.
You can hear my kids screaming in the background on the 911 tape. So my husband, Daryl, said, let's go outside. It was not like a plane. It was not like a blimp. As slow as it possibly could. It was a cylinder shape, I said of a chrome material, saw no windows, anything like that, and it had lights coming out of the bottom. I said to Daryl, what is that? He said, Holly, it's a UFO. We stood out there for about, I want to say 15, 20 minutes before Officer Veldhaus got there.
My thought on UFOs was skeptical. I was met outside by Holly Graves and her husband. I saw 2 lights. They were both moving in a southwest direction. The lights went from white to green, and they're fairly close together, different than any normal aircraft that I've seen.
And then Officer Veldhaus left. At that point, I heard Daryl scream. Broke up into 5 before it disappeared.
As I was trying to follow the light, we were getting more calls. Ottawa County Central Dispatch.
정체불명의 물체에 대한 신고는 약 60건이나 더 접수되었고 사람들의 목격담은 모두 동일했습니다. 이어 벨트하우스 경관은 기상청과 연락을 해보는데
Hi, Muskegon. This is Ottawa County 911 calling. We've had about 60 UFO calls.
When he said something about UFO skies, I thought, oh boy, you know, a lot of people are drinking out tonight.
I'm looking at it in the vertical now, and there's a large return down there. Okay, it's moving towards the west-southwest.
For a brief moment of about 15 seconds, it just stopped and hovered, which is highly unusual.
It's gone up. I'm getting it now at about 12,000 feet.
We know it was solid. It was smooth. It seemed extremely reflective. The northernmost one would jump 20 miles, hover. The other 2 would jump 20 miles and then make that triangular formation again.
These are all up around about between 7 and 12,000 feet. 3 of them in a triangle just off the coast of Berrien County.
Once it got to that one area in southern Lake Michigan, it stopped and they were met up by dozens and dozens of other objects that I could see going from lower, say like 4,000 or 5,000 feet, going as high as 55,000 feet.
And there's just no technology I know of that can go that fast. I did stay over and watch it a little bit more, and one by one they would disappear until they all just kind of faded away.
Driving home that night, everything was going through my mind. What's out there? It was like just a huge change in the way I had to think that there's more out there than we all know.
그리고 다음날 이 소식을 들은 저널리스트 마이클은 관련 신고 전화 기록들을 전달받아 음성들을 모두 확인하는데
Popped in the cassette device, it knocks your socks off.
I don't know if you guys do anything on UFOs at all. It's not a real emergency. We just called about them UFOs. We thought they're out there. airplanes.
You can hear the sincerity in their voices. You can hear the amazement.
그리고 그의 기사는 언론에 보도되고 미디어에서도 UFO 목격담은 연일 화제였죠.
I had no idea it was recorded. And that's when just everything broke loose.
Reported seeing the strange phenomenon in the night sky.
It had lights on it.
Flashing green lights, and once in a while you'd see like a red. Were they watching us?
MUFON is the world's largest civilian UFO research organization, and we have over 4,000 members in 40 countries. This UFO event in March of '94, over 300 witnesses to UFOs in a single night, and 42 counties had UFO sightings that night of March 8th.
Calls, I remember, from two pilots. Both of them separately verified this very bright cylindrical object going in front of them across Lake Michigan and then just disappearing at a phenomenal rate of speed.
하지만 목격자들에 대한 조롱이 생겨나고 기상학자 잭은 동료들에게 조롱거리가 되어 근무지마저 이전되어 버리죠.
And what I had seen might sound crazy. The National Weather Service, they did not want to be known as the UFO reporting center.
Could have been the culprit for the strange returns on radar, something called ground clutter.
But at this point, I was told not to talk or give interviews to anybody. Leo was the one that said, Jack, you got to get out of Michigan. Solely because of this UFO. That was the impact of my career, yes.
This report had lots of input from the military. It was released by the Office of the Director of National Intelligence.
We're going against the wind. The wind's 120 knots from the west.
Where an object was tracked buzzing an airport back out before appearing to split into two and disappearing.
시간이 흐르고 은퇴한 잭은 뒤늦게 자신이 목격한 그것에 대한 연구를 시작하고 목격자들을 만나 관련 정보를 모으기로 합니다.
Jack Michelle, nice to meet you finally.
It's so nice to meet you.
I know you've been investigating this the whole time. There's a lot of gaps I'd like to see filled up.
March 8th of '94, young couple that were camping out that night, and there was a tall tower of water. They said it looked like a huge waterfall, at least 20 feet wide.
In the same place, I have them at 6,000 feet at that point. A lot of these UFO events occur around great big bodies of water. So there has to be a connection.
1994 sighting has affected me popularity kind of way. Recording from the radar operator did not exist. It would affect me differently, I believe.
The interesting thing to me about the two lights was one of them broke away from the other at a noticeably high speed.
The beam of my radar to track the one object, and then it split into several objects. But the one thing that was very odd was each triangle was lined up perfectly down the beam of the radar. It almost made me wonder, are they communicating, this way? I just keep having to say, what did I see that night? What did I see going 72,000 miles per hour at least, in a second?
Nobody can conclusively say these are any kind of extraterrestrial craft. I have a feeling we're not alone in the vastness of this universe.
When I look through here, it takes me back almost 30 years.
And give me their story about that March 8, 1994 event. I am not going to give up this obsession of mine to try to figure it out. I can see doing this the rest of my life.
Hi, this is Deidre with Hancock County ODOT. Our guys are out mowing on 75 and came across a weird-looking sleeping bag, and there's something in it that's tied up.
And realized that it was something heavy in the bag. We figured we better call patrol. We didn't want to open it up. He opened the bag up and looked in there, and he's like, that's definitely a foot in there.
The remains consisted of the lower portion of the body. Everything from the umbilicus up was gone. Humans are capable of very vile acts.
2018년 9월 한 아들을 둔 39살의 데이비드는 처참한 모습으로 발견되어 세간의 주목을 받게 됩니다.
This is where my son David's funeral service was held. This auditorium absolutely packed. David was 39 when he was killed. He was a fun-loving person, serious but fun-loving, tall, handsome, athletic.
David was my best friend. He took pride in everything that he did.
David was a best friend to me. Once he became a father, it upped a level.
Everything was geared around his son.
The relationship with me and my dad, I would say we were like best friends. We're always doing something together.
누구에게도 미움받지 않고 성실하게 살아가던 데이비드는 태미라는 고등학교 동창과 연애를 하게 되는데 고운 성품을 가진 데이비드는 자신에게 그런 일이 벌어질 거라고 상상도 못했습니다.
They were spending a lot of time together. Maybe this is probably the one that my dad is going to be with and marry.
But she was very obsessive over David.
2018년 9월 30일 아들 DJ는 데이비드의 집에 가는 길 이상한 문자를 받게 됩니다.
So getting replies back from my dad saying he was sick and like very sick to where like he didn't want nobody around him. And I pulled up to my dad's house. I seen Tammy taking out the garbage. I said, hey, whatever. She seen me. She ran to the apartment door, like ran. When I got up to my dad's house, the door was locked. You'd have thought since she saw me, she'd have left it unlocked. But I had a key. I noticed my dad's bedroom door was closed. I said, since I'm at my dad's house, let me just, say what's up to him, stuff like that. And she told me like, nah, he's not here. He went out for a walk. Sick, cold outside. Who goes for a walk? Thought in my head like, it's pretty weird, but I have to make it to my grandmother's house. And I just left.
I've known David for 19 years. Last time I seen Dave was that Thursday. We had to work Sunday. But Dave didn't come to work Sunday. When Tuesday came around, Dave ain't been to work in 3 days.
On Tuesday, I got a call. Roger said, can you go by his apartment just to see if he was okay? Then I called David's girlfriend, Tammy. Is David okay? She said, I haven't talked to him since Sunday.
We get to the door, knocking on the door. Nobody's coming to the door. So I went to grab the door handle and you can open the door.
At that point, I knew that something wasn't right.
결벽증이 있는 데이비드의 집은 엉망인 상태였고 카펫에 묻은 혈흔 자국을 감추려 침대를 이동한 것을 금세 알 수 있었습니다.
And at the top of the mattress, there was a hole.
I walked around. There was a hole in the bottom left-hand corner of the closet door. Being a soldier, I knew it was a bullet hole.
We went to Melvindale Police, filed a missing persons report. We're searching, calling hospitals. I'm calling morgues.
데이비드의 실종은 경찰에 접수되어 방송으로 송출되고 가족들은 초조한 마음으로 그의 소식을 기다릴 수밖에 없었죠.
I called Tammy. I said, Tammy, I'm gonna ask you one more time, where is my brother? And she said, Tasia, I don't know what you're talking about. Like, I haven't seen him since Sunday.
She just went about her day, living a normal life.
한편 데이비드의 실종신과 하루 전 경찰은 75번 고속도로 부근에서 끔찍한 죽음을 발견하는데
Leads by the berm of the road off of I-75 was the dismembered lower half. We found a very characteristic tattoo on the left upper leg. It was a tattoo of a pit bull with red eyes.
그렇게 실종 신고 이틀 후 경찰은 데이비드의 죽음이라는 것을 알아내죠.
Chief of Police of Melvindale called me and asked me to come down because he had some questions to ask me. And I asked the chief, I said, found him, and he said, yeah. For me being a soldier, death is something that's part of life. It's inevitable. Never thought it would happen to a family member in this manner. Really, really tough. She just broke down. It's like everything was like drained out of her. Nothing I could do but hold her. So that's all I could do.
They found him chopped up, his body parts chopped up, crying, full of anger and sadness. I'm putting all my arrows at Tammy because you're the last person that saw him.
태미를 본 데이비드의 지인들은 모두 입을 모아 그녀가 평소에 이부증이 있는 듯 집착과 소유욕이 심한 모습을 보였다고 말하며 모두들 태미를 범인으로 지목하고 있었죠.
Angry female, that's how I chalked it up.
경찰에게 연락을 받고 이틀 뒤 가족들이 모여 DJ의 풋볼 경기 관람 중 태미가 경찰에 체포되었다는 소식을 듣게 됩니다.
Tammy was arrested that night, lifted everyone up.
We got some justice, everybody full of tears and, just happy.
A couple days later, she was released.
She was released pending more investigation. They didn't have enough at that time to hold her in charge with a crime.
그렇게 어이없게 태미가 풀려나고 이틀 뒤 시신이 발견된 고속도로 부근에서 또 다른 부위가 발견되죠.
Was in a little black duffel bag, and in the bag there was a human head, and one of the grocery bags was tied under his chin.
이어 6일 뒤 나머지 시신들이 모두 발견되고 비로소 데이비드의 부검을 진행하게 됩니다.
You could put the whole body together now. He had a gunshot wound below the earlobe and sort of toward the back. Exit was at the top of the head. Now I had a cause of death. There was no evidence of defense wounds, no evidence of a struggle, no other evidence of injury anywhere. Interestingly enough, he had an antihistamine in his bloodstream. That makes you sleepy.
유가족은 태미가 약을 먹인 후 집에 침입해 데이비드를 살해한 것으로 추측하고 있었고 직접적인 증거는 없었지만 태미가 범인이라는 것은 너무나도 유력했죠.
The lower part of the remains alone weighed 73 pounds. He had been separated by cuts. These were, in my opinion, probably nothing more than your average kitchen knife.
태미는 사이코패스임에 분명했고 사건은 연방보안관도 동참해 수사가 확대됩니다.
And then wake up and go to work for the rest of the week. That tells me that she's a psychopath. It wasn't until January of 2019 that we found out that October of 2018, Tammy had fled Michigan.
Tamara Renee Williams, and police say she murdered and dismembered her boyfriend in Melvindale.
It takes a special individual to do that to somebody. Dismemberment, tampering with evidence, and felony firearm. I learned quite a bit about Tammy Williams during my investigation.
10월 16일 미시간에서 목격된 태미는 17일 기차를 타고 시카고로 이동한 뒤 18일 뉴욕에서 마지막으로 목격된 이후 태미는 모습을 감쪽같이 감춰버렸죠.
Hair, one day she has short hair, one day it was blonde.
The one thing that's common on her, though, she's a huge rose tattoo on her left shoulder. Pretty difficult to miss, cover up, or remove. Somebody is helping her financially and also providing her with a roof, a place to stay. She just did not disappear. Throughout my interviews with many different people, she's always been one of those girls that needs to have a guy in her life, and that scares me. And she could hurt somebody else.
Maybe she's dating another guy. You know, he could be at risk.
There is not a day that goes by that I do not think of David.
I'm doing okay, but there are thoughts that get to my head that almost make me want to break down sometimes.
How much light somebody brings into a room until it's no longer there. I just miss him. I miss everything about him.
Buffalo Jim, Buffalo Wrestling Show. He was Buffalo Jim, and he was a light of joy.
The Las Vegas Review-Journal voted him Las Vegas's most colorful character in 2005.
Peace and love.
We will do that.
This weekend, outspoken enemy of the mob, Buffalo Jim Barrier, was found dead in a local motel room.
Despite what he thought were ongoing threats to his safety, Jim Barrier refused to back down.
We deserve justice for our father.
라스베이거스의 대명사 버펄로 짐은 2008년 4월 6일 모텔에서 죽음으로 발견됩니다.
Notices a gentleman asleep on the bed. At 1:10 p.m., the housekeeper returns and finds him in the same position, at which time they believe he's dead. The body was found lying face up on the bed, shirt open, and his pants down around his ankles. There was a white powdery substance found on his beard and on his shirt. The nature in which the body was found was a little suspicious. At some point, they identified him as being James Barrier, went by the name of Buffalo Jim.
And he was someone who was larger than life.
Buffalo Jim Barrier loved Las Vegas.
Just a character.
His dad was a Cherokee Indian.
His childhood wasn't very easy.
He started off doing mechanics out of his van.
He slept on the gas station floors.
And eventually made his way up to the level he was at with owning his own auto repair shop that he started in the late 70s. Was a very caring and hardworking person. He always made sure to provide for our family. He was so much fun. He would always bring the excitement. And he always loved wrestling.
Buffalo wanted to run his own school and wrestling company.
His style was badass.
Everybody wanted to be up around Buffalo. Became very good friends right off the bat.
His television show was on late night cable TV. I mean, he had a tremendous following. It was so camp.
You never know what's going to happen.
4월 5일 7시경 저녁을 먹고 들어오겠다는 말을 남기고 집을 떠난 버펄로는 그 이후로 볼 수 없었죠.
That night, my father mentioned that he was going to go meet with a friend. He said, I'll be home by 12. Around 9:30 p.m., I texted him, but he didn't reply. I tried calling my father in the morning again, and he didn't answer. It's around 2 p.m. I was with my sister, Elise, and I get a phone call from a police officer saying that she's calling about my father. Your father is dead, and we need you to come to Motel 6 on Boulder Highway to come and identify the body. Approached by a police officer from Metro, invited into the motel room to identify my father's body. He was in a body bag, and the bag was unzipped. They didn't give us any information and details of how he was found or what happened to my father. The police handed my sister Elise and I an envelope with his car keys, his wallet, his cell phone, and the receipt to the motel. I went ahead and I listened to his voicemails to find out who had left that message. In her message, she had said, "Hey, Buffalo, this is Lisa." And so I called the number and the woman picked up. And I said, "Are you Lisa?" I said, "Do you know Buffalo Jim?" And she goes, "I don't know Buffalo Jim." And she hung up. Why would she leave a voicemail voicing concern?
It was weird because Buffalo hadn't called me. And then phone rings. It was his daughter. Dad's gone. To go from that presence in your life all the time, it was different when everything just shut down. Boom, right there.
April 7th, 2008, I was assigned Mr. Berry's autopsy. Mr. Berry had significant heart disease, and his cause of death was a combination of the heart disease and the cocaine. Mr. Berry had no significant external trauma. He had a white powdery substance on his nose and on his beard. The only positive was cocaine.
첫 번째 의문점은 그는 전혀 좋아하는 사람도 하는 사람도 아니었던 것이었습니다.
Buffalo loved to go out and have a great time, but he never did any around me.
In my entire 24 years of knowing my father, I've never seen him ever do any drugs of any kind.
That would have been completely uncharacteristic of the Buffalo that I knew. Buffalo had a cocaine problem in his early years and was proud of the fact that he had beaten it.
When we went to identify his body, there was no evidence of pain in the motel room at all.
All they said was it was white powder.
Something was not right. Foul play was involved.
두 번째 의문점은 버펄로를 만난 여성 리사의 증언과 행동이 상식적으로 일치하지 않았던 것이었습니다.
The detectives at some point had tracked down a young lady who was in the room with Mr. Berrier on the night of his passing. And she had told them that she had had a long relationship with Mr. Berrier.
My dad somehow left the house, decided to leave and go meet her.
They drove to the Motel 6 on Boulder Highway. At 8:22, Buffalo Jim is seen in the lobby of Motel 6 getting a key card for room 105. Lisa says, once inside the room 105, they were playing a fantasy game. She says that Mr. Berrier lays down on the bed and he starts convulsing. She leaves Buffalo Jim in the motel room.
His room was accessed 7 minutes before he got there by a guest room key.
There was a key swipe, meaning the room had been entered shortly prior to Buffalo going in.
It was late in the evening. Could it have been a maid? Highly unlikely. Also on the key access report, it said it was a guest key. When my father was found dead on the Motel 6 bed, he had a $1 bill in his wallet folded. He never folded money in his wallet. I had heard that that's a very notorious mob hit sign.
평소 버펄로는 자신의 정비소와 깽단과 연루된 스트립 클럽의 구역 다툼으로 골머리를 앓고 있었죠.
The death threats that my father received between a neighboring business, the Crazy Horse 2, and my father.
The Crazy Horse 2 was a gentleman's club. It was right next door to Buffalo's garage. It was owned by a man named Rick Rizzolo.
There was some rumors of mob involvement with the Crazy Horse.
클럽을 확장하려는 릭이 버펄로의 정비소를 쫓아내고 싶어 했고 버펄로는 생계 문제로 절대 자리를 내어줄 수 없었습니다.
And I've got 4 children to feed and I don't think so.
And that's when the problems arose from that moment forward.
그 후 무차별적인 정비소의 기물 파손과 함께 버펄로를 끊임없이 괴롭히기 시작했죠.
It was an ongoing battle.
Auto mechanic Jim Berrier says the Topless Club has brought nothing but trouble to the neighborhood.
Buffalo's got a tremendous amount of damage, and it was getting up there in the hundreds of thousands of dollars over time here. Intentional infliction of emotional distress on Buffalo. I did file a lawsuit on Buffalo's behalf for $1 million on this matter to try to get him some relief.
그런데 리기 클럽은 이미 FBI의 표적이었던 것이었습니다.
I was assigned to work the organized crime program with the FBI. Back in the 80s and 90s and 2000s, the mafia was involved in running these various strip clubs around town. Strip clubs make more money per square foot. For the most part, it's cash. Nobody paid taxes on any of this money.
돈 세탁 혐의를 수사하던 FBI에게 버펄로가 정보를 제공해 주었고 FBI는 그의 덕분에 리기 범죄를 입증할 수 있었습니다.
During that time frame, supplying the FBI information about what was going on.
I would say approximately 2 years. It was very helpful. On February 20th, 2003, we executed the search warrant on the Crazy Horse 2, like 80 or 100 agents.
After all these years, they're finally getting this guy.
Sometime in about 2006, there was a plea deal reached where Rick Rizzolo would plead to income tax evasion. Early 2007, Rick Rizzolo was sentenced to 1 year and a day. Unfortunately, Rick Rizzolo only served 10 months for good behavior. Rick Rizzolo's house arrest only lasted a week, April 4th, 2008. Buffalo died on April 5th. You know, Rizlo gets out of prison and Buffalo's dead next day.
Another really strange coincidence. I was told that Lisa, the woman in the motel room, she was a stripper and she worked at the Crazy Horse too and had for many years. And Buffalo ends up dead that night with Lisa in the motel.
심지어 버펄로가 사망한 당일 그가 소유한 롤스로이스가 범죄 현장에서 감쪽같이 사라졌다 수사가 끝난 후 나타난 것이었습니다.
And so we asked the police officer, where's the car? And the police officer said, well, we don't know where the car is.
On April 6th of 2008, the day the body was found, police released room 105 back to Motel 6 management. At 5:30, Mr. Barrier's Rolls Royce is located in the parking lot of Motel 6 after officers previously could not find it.
She's like, what do you mean the car's there? It wasn't there. Well, the car's there.
Barrier's car was searched by Metro. That search did not turn up any suspicious evidence.
설상가상 버펄로의 휴대폰은 수사 목록에 포함되어 있지 않았고 처음 보는 핸드폰만이 수사 목록에 포함되어 있었죠.
So whose phone is this? And why was it in his room? I talked to my father that Thursday before he passed away. And he goes, Rick Rizlo just got out of prison. My father told me that if they were to get him, specifically the Crazy Horse 2 people, they would make it look like I died of a drug overdose with women. And also, my father received a letter the day he died. And it says, Mr. Barrier, meetings have been taking place at various locations around town by Rick Rizlo. He's using people to get close to you. He discussed using a female to get access to your business.
When Buffalo died, the lawsuit against Rick Rizlo died with him.
So many people tell me that as a get-out-of-jail gift, decided to get rid of Buffalo. That would have been the biggest favor anybody could have done for Rick Rizlo.
It's got a bad smell to it.
누가 봐도 릭 리촐리의 살인교사 정황이 뚜렷했지만 경찰은 수사를 축소하고 사건은 사고사로 종료되었습니다.
I am left with more questions than answers.
이렇게 버펄로 짐의 사건은 의문만 가득 남긴 채 사람들의 기억 속으로 묻히게 되었죠.
In 1999, my father and I drove up to Mount Charleston, and my father said to me, if anything were to ever happen to me, would you stand up? And I said, yeah, but what does that mean? I now know what that meant.
It's just a big lug that everybody loved that we'll never be able to fill.
I miss him a lot.
We just want to know what happened to our father.
We get asked all the time, do you believe in Bigfoot? We don't like using the term believe because to believe is an act of faith based on no evidence.
Science today may look at that and say, that can't happen, that it's make-believe. But these things did happen, and a lot of times we can't explain it.
All I can say to them is, you weren't there. You didn't see what I saw.
미국의 애리조나, 유타, 뉴멕시코주에 걸쳐있는 가장 큰 원주민 보호구역, 그곳에서 많은 일들이 일어나죠.
The Navajo Rangers were formed in 1957.
When I look back at wanting to become a Navajo Ranger, it was really an exclusive club.
I met Stan in about 1989, and we started working together quite a bit. 2000, our chief ranger called us all in. Our chief ranger, he said, from now on, these cases are going to be investigated. And then he turned to me and Stan, and you two guys are going to get the major cases.
The reason John and I were chosen is that we grew up in both worlds.
He was born in Oklahoma and raised there. I was born in Los Angeles.
주민들이 목격한 이상 현상들에 대해 수사를 시작하게 된 존은 이때까지만 해도 온갖 소문에 대해 회의적인 사람이었습니다.
So we're going to be the X-Files. One of the first cases we worked where we had over 30 people report seeing a Bigfoot, which is real unusual. This is the place where the investigations...
Coming down that highway right there, I thought a person was hitchhiking, but as I got a little bit closer, it wasn't a person.
We would interview witnesses. We've had reports of Bigfoot stepping over corrals, taking sheep and stepping back over and walking off with them.
I had heard the name Brenda Harris. She resided up along the San Juan River.
This is where we used to live, and this is where we had some encounters that had happened.
My husband had just left for work at 10:30.
I heard something very heavy walking onto the porch, and next thing I know, we started seeing the doorknob turning. I swung the door open, and I just seen this thing standing in front of me. It was black, tall, and it was covered in hair.
I couldn't believe what I was seeing.
And it just darted off the porch, and it ran to the west.
And then finally, when daybreak broke, I said, okay, well, let's go walk around the house.
This is where we found a footprint.
A little over 18 inches long and 4 inches wide.
빅풋을 목격한 것은 그녀뿐만이 아니었죠.
reporting the same kind of activity.
So we took a team of about 6 guys up along the San Juan River. We came out with foot track evidence. You got a 21-inch footprint with the toes showing. And the thing's got a 5-foot stride. Caught in the fence in the barbed wire was a tuft of hair. These were real small, but they did have the tag ends on them, is what they need for DNA examination. The DNA analysis would have told what species or major group of species that it belonged to. The report just said unknown carnivore. There's no identification for it in the DNA database. And that DNA database has animals from all over the world. There was no explanation for that.
그녀는 트레일러 근처에 카메라를 설치했고 어린 빅풋의 모습과 함께 그들의 개성 또한 수집할 수 있었습니다.
This is where the horse corral stood, probably as high as that. And we had a solid roof up on top. And over in that corner was the panels were being torn off.
Tore it, like paper.
She put up cameras around the horse corral.
There's a silhouette that hits the side of the corral, and you just see this tall figure standing there. We didn't know what it was, and that really scared us.
빅풋의 목격담은 수많은 미스터리들 중 단순한 시작에 불과했죠.
When we started getting reports of Bigfoot and the reports started increasing, there was a corresponding increase in UFO sightings.
This is an area just off Highway Route 4, an unidentified object light source beamed light from this area.
It was really long, like
They're somehow related. When you hear the word paranormal, one of the common phenomenon is what people refer to as an orb.
I would like to stay anonymous, tend to think you're crazy or to not believe in the experience you had. As I'm driving home from work, there are no houses, no lights, no other vehicles on the road. A red light off to my driver's side, and it followed me for maybe a minute or two. It never emitted a sound of any kind. I looked to my left, it was no longer red. I realized whatever this was clearly intelligent enough to follow me less than 500 feet in front of me instantaneously and then shot straight up in the sky. Once it went up in the sky, it arced across the sky and it looked like a shooting star. I didn't want to see it again.
For those people that have those firsthand experiences with the supernatural or these paranormal phenomena, it's something they're never going to forget.
But one of the more fascinating cases occurred with a non-Navajo of the reservation living near Greasewood.
Probably about 10 years of my life on the Navajo reservation. So I'd been living in Lower Greasewood for about a year. One night, just as the sun was going down, just at dusk, just this odd light in the sky caught my attention. It has red lights. Fast forward a week, I see it again. I thought, I've got to get a picture of this. Any Navajo that I talked to about it, none of them were shocked. I didn't think aliens existed. I didn't think that there were UFOs. Taught me that there are things out there that we don't understand.
On the walls in Red Rock Canyons, and you see images of UFOs.
One of the most terrifying that we've investigated involves the legendary Navajo skinwalker.
Most Navajos have heard the term skinwalker, an entity that can shapeshift or change form from a human form into that of an animal.
They can change shape into a coyote, into a wolf, into anything that they have the skin of. I've had people tell me that they've seen them on the sides of roads when they were in human form and just blotched it all over your body.
Because I've experienced it myself. The time I was living near Fort Defiance, I borrowed my older sister's car and went to the movies one night. I had something that was running alongside my vehicle, and it begins getting within 3 or 4 feet of the passenger side of my car, and it was keeping up with me at highway speed. This thing had the body of like a greyhound. From head to toe, it was solid white. I locked eyes with it. A fiery orange. It was like it was looking straight through me. I came sliding into the driveway, jumped out, ran inside, and my father was still awake. I explained what I'd seen, and that's a skinwalker. To see it with your own eyes, know that it wasn't make-believe. This was in its actual running on all fours form.
These things are dangerous, and it's frightening.
One of the most interesting and eye-opening cases experience in my career as a Navajo Ranger was a haunting case involving a government office building. There was employees that were saying, oh my gosh, there's crazy activity in the building. This building had 3 different levels. On that particular investigation, I developed a team of 4 individuals to be able to witness these things on a weekend around 9 o'clock. I was downstairs. All of a sudden, over here on my left side, there was 2 distinct male voices. Immediately following that, hear a coin fall on the floor.
Sure enough, there's like a quarter. Where'd that quarter come from?
I had everybody pull their pockets out just to make sure nobody had coins in their pockets. And almost immediately, as we went into that next room, a coin fell and we could see it.
Why are these things doing this? Where are they coming from?
These are the actual coins that were involved in the investigation in the office space there. There was a total of 65 coins. They all landed heads up. Following the investigation the next night, one of the investigators, Dusty, was here. As we were sitting here working on the computers, quarter fell behind me in the middle of the floor back here. 5 coins fell over the top of his head. The coin activity that was involved in the investigation had followed us here to my residence. Coins was really key. There's an underlying commonality among all of these paranormal events.
One of the things that we found was that all of these different phenomenon can be connected through this idea of a multi-universe or dimensional gates.
So the coins obviously came from somewhere else. They are different dimensions. If you look at these Navajo creation stories, kind of fits, you know?
In the emergence, the Navajo people came through several different worlds. They say that there's a hole in the sky, and they climb up through this hole.
There's so much more to the universe and to our world than what's right here in front of us. We've only begun to scratch the surface.
1 year ago tonight, Joshua Guimau vanished from an apartment near St. John's.
This week marks 15 years since Josh Guimau went.
I think Josh had secrets just like everybody else has secrets.
2002년 11월 9일 세인트 존스 대학교 기숙사에서 조슈아 기몽은 어떤 흔적도 없이 사라져버립니다.
People start realizing Josh isn't there. A couple of people at the party had noticed a male get up and leave, but they weren't quite sure if it was Josh.
He's just gone.
그는 학교에서 인기 많은 학생이었고 학우들과 좋은 관계를 유지하며 뚜렷한 꿈을 갖고 있는 청년이었죠.
In our sophomore year of high school, we started dating. So Josh was my high school sweetheart. He was very handsome, blonde with blue eyes. He was athletic, had a great sense of humor.
Josh and I, we met when we were in about 2nd grade and then became really close at the end of high school. After that, we still stayed close.
Josh liked to have a lot of fun. He was outgoing. He was always happy and smarter than he should have been.
Josh was interested in being a lawyer.
But good, solid teaching never will.
As soon as Josh was going to turn 35, he was running for the next presidential election. Planned on going to law school once we finished college, and then from there, he was going to be a lawyer, and then from there, he would be a politician, and eventually he would be the president.
My sophomore year, I joined the mock trial team with Josh, who was a year behind me at St. John's, and I was one of his best friends at the time he disappeared.
The last time I saw Josh was the week before down at McAllister College watching a mock trial.
So the last time I saw him would have been after dinner, probably 6:37. He was with his friend Alex in our apartment. I think it was sometime a little after 2 a.m. when I left Katie's apartment. I went home, I went upstairs. I noticed Josh wasn't in his room, but I just said, oh, he must still be at the party. The next morning, I saw he still wasn't there, and I thought that was weird. I checked my AOL Instant Messenger. His account had been idle for probably over 12 hours. All I could think of is like, where is he? I talked to Greg and Alex, but they didn't know where he was.
I knew something was wrong. Something was preventing him from coming back because
I got a call from the Dean of Students Sunday night at 10:30 on November 10th. And he said, you need to report your son missing. His friends haven't seen him since last night.
Call from Joshua's mother reporting Joshua's disappearance came in November 10th at 11:42 in the evening.
신고를 받은 경찰은 조슈아가 지내던 기숙사부터 살펴보지만 어떠한 흔적도 증거도 없었습니다.
I remember his keys were there, and we looked and checked, and his car was still in the parking lot where I remember him last parking.
So we talked to Joshua's friends and roommates, helped track his movements and activities the night before his disappearance.
Josh and his friends were in Josh's apartment at St. Maur House.
We do know that Joshua's key card was used to access his apartment at 11:06. That was the last time Josh key carded back into his apartment. The poker party that Joshua went to was a pretty small gathering, 10 to 12 kids. They said he showed up at the party between 11:30 and 12.
I talked to a lot of Josh's friends who were at the poker party with him. He was having a great time. He was joking around. He was acting like his normal self at the party.
Eventually, they saw Joshua get up from the table, and nobody really paid attention to where he was going. He just got up and left the party without saying anything to anybody.
I can't remember any time that he had done that previously, where he would have just left without saying goodbye.
That first night of the investigation, a tracking dog was called in to track Josh's scent.
Led to that pathway that's between Metten Court Apartments and St. Maur House, and the trail kind of stopped there.
And then they found 2 witnesses.
Through our investigation, we identified 2 witnesses that were students. One was a St. John student, one was a St. Ben student, so basically a guy and a girl.
Between 12:15 and 12:30, they were walking down the road towards the Metten Court Apartments. They continued to walk, and when they looked back a second time, that person wasn't there any longer.
So it is believed that that was Josh.
The witnesses didn't report seeing anything or anyone else, and the overall physical description matched that of Joshua's.
He up and vanished.
There were numerous agencies involved in the search efforts. Stearns County Sheriff's Office was the lead investigative agency.
Wooded, hilly, thick terrain.
I went out physically searching, walking around the campus.
세인트 존스의 부지는 너무나도 넓었고 주 방위군도 수색 작업에 투입됐죠.
There was hundreds of people there.
It was probably the biggest search effort that I've ever seen.
Because we're looking for our friend in this brush for whatever we could find, and we didn't see anything.
At the time that Josh disappeared, there was several college-age students that were missing.
그 무렵 비슷하게 실종된 2 청년의 사건과 혼선이 빚어지고 수사는 약간의 지연이 생기게 됩니다.
During the initial searches for Josh, K-9 was brought in. Dog led us down to the water by the bridge.
Our searches included dragging for a body, divers in the water, boats where we're using sonar technology. But winter set in. There was some thought because the water was so cold, his body may never surface until the water temperatures rose. So we did suspend the search activities in the waters, and we would just wait until the spring.
Kind of felt helpless.
Guimau was last seen about midnight as he left a party.
To be honest with you, I don't think Brian was satisfied with the direction we were taking the investigation, the speed in which we were doing the investigation, our attention to the investigation.
It's not uncommon for those bloodhounds to be able to pick up the scent long after an individual has gone missing. This dog traced Joshua's scent from Metten Court to Stumpf Lake, then to St. John's Abbey.
Claiming a monk molested him inside the school. This is the 4th lawsuit filed against a monk at St. John's Abbey.
So when the search led to the Abbey,
She's casting right over here.
where the general public's not typically allowed, ended up contacting us to kind of deal with it.
Brian Gimone asked that the search continue inside the Abbey. They were denied access. Later, our office was called and were able to obtain consent to search through the Abbey with the dog.
The dog found Josh's scent inside the Abbey near the rear of the building, but no evidence of Josh was ever found.
So far, nothing in this investigation has connected them with Guimau's disappearance.
The sound of a family still hoping, still praying for something lost. Others have been found, the ones who disappeared around the same time.
겨울이 지나고 비슷한 시기에 실종된 2 남성은 발견되지만 조슈아만이 여전히 오리무중이었죠.
In the spring, the sheriff's office started searching the waters right away and areas around waters. I remember Brian was searching the lakes and he's out there in a kayak. What if his body floated up right next to that kayak?
If their theory was right, he should have been right there in the water. But that wasn't the case.
Well, when Joshua's body didn't surface, there were so many theories about what could have happened to him. I think the most prevailing theory was probably that somebody that knew Josh or was close to Josh did something to Josh. They're all kids with goals and aspirations, and they've got their whole life in front of them. If they know something or something happened, they have a future to protect. If something happened at the party, I don't think it's possible to keep 10 or 12 kids silent on it.
I believe the kids at the party know more than they say.
조슈아의 어떤 흔적도 찾지 못한 채 5년이 흘러버리고 수사는 종료되었음에도 수사관은 조슈아의 컴퓨터 드라이브를 중심으로 조사를 이어갔습니다.
It's been 5 years since a St. John student was last seen. Still, his family and friends hope for his return.
And specifically in 2008, the thing that I began looking at was Josh's computer. Different people have looked at the actual original hard drive, but in 2008, additional technology giving me some new investigative things to look at, some different possibilities.
수사기관에 맡겨진 컴퓨터의 드라이브가 복구되고 수사관의 눈길을 끈 것은 조슈아의 인터넷 사용 기록이었죠.
A key to solving the case where he was spending time on Yahoo Personals.
We identified 3 different profiles that we believed were used by Josh, one of which has his partial part of his name and a zip code for the area he lived. And then 2 other ones portray himself as a female, with follow-up with individuals later on that chatting online with men and portraying himself as a female.
Some of the things that were on his computer would lead you to believe that maybe he's looking for casual encounters of some kind, trying to meet people online that he didn't necessarily share with anyone.
One of the theories is that Josh potentially met someone on an instant messaging chat site and ended up chatting with them ahead of time to line up maybe some sort of meetup, maybe meeting with someone that he maybe didn't fully know, and something happened to him.
수사관은 캠퍼스의 보안 서비스 회사의 기록을 조사하는데 캠퍼스에 발길이 뜸한 여러 곳에서 밤중에 수상한 차량을 목격한 기록을 발견합니다.
Campus security stated in the incident reports that when they drove up to the vehicle, they noticed a college-aged male get out of the front passenger seat and run off into the darkness. But in the second report, Life Safety was able to speak with another college-aged male who was in the front passenger seat of that vehicle.
Vehicle description, and in one instance had stopped and spoken with this individual.
해당 인물과 다시 연락해봤지만 그의 진술은 일관됐고 그의 차량은 난파되어 더 이상 조사할 수 있는 것이 없었습니다.
Probable that he was on a dating site or trying to meet people, and I think it's probably our most likely avenue or theory.
Josh would be 39 now, and I would assume he would be a lawyer, if not a senator already.
Oh, Josh would be the president of the United States right now if he hadn't disappeared. If not president, on his way to being president. I think Josh probably had secrets. Whoever knew those secrets would come forward.
What happened that day? There's just so many things that made no sense.
They won't say suicide. They won't say suicide. This is a murder.
2013년 1월 27일 플로리다 브레이든턴에 두 아들을 둔 남성 패트릭 리 멀린스는 어느 날 갑자기 모습을 감추어 버립니다.
Pat's boat was a 14-foot stump knocker. My brother Pat and I grew up on the water, and we were able to go out all the time. Boats were everywhere. I mean, we all had boats. Stump knocker is a brand flat bottom boat.
Stump knocker was pretty much for the Braden River, which was extremely. On January 27th, 2013, Pat wished me a good day, gave me a kiss, and off I went. We had a pretty regular routine. On a Sunday, I came home that night, 7. When I got home, Pat wasn't there. Then I walked out to where our stump knocker was kept. It was not there. Then I realized I needed help.
다급한 엄마의 전화를 받은 아들은 1시간 떨어진 템파에서 급하게 집으로 돌아와 자정부터 집 근처를 수색하기 시작했죠.
So I just jumped on and we started searching. We focused in the Braden River because we knew he was on the stump knocker, which is designed for shallow water. And then we started to go into all the small little nooks and crannies and streams.
We started a search operation with our Marine unit to commence searching for a lost boater at that point.
Helicopters went over our house in the neighborhood all night long. The next day after Pat disappeared, the Manatee Sheriff's Office called and said the stump knocker had been found.
다음 날 이상하게도 집에서 먼 거리에서 보트가 발견되고 이상한 점은 한두 가지가 아니었습니다.
The boat was found northwest of Egmont Key.
The boat was amazingly far out, so far from our house.
His belongings were in the boat, but he wasn't with it.
But the anchor was not in the boat and it was out of gas. There was no indication of a crime scene, no obvious sign of injury or anything that traumatic that happened. There was no troubled areas that in his past or problems that we could center on that might lead us to conclude that he went missing on his own or someone else caused.
We did go and take a look at the boat, just some kind of light red paint markings on the side of the boat. And that was something that was not there in the past.
When we find an unmanned vessel in a location like this, we use a method called the reverse drift method. So looking at where they found the boat, it was about 9 miles offshore. We estimated that the vessel probably drifted from somewhere in the lower Tampa Bay.
계속해서 수색을 이어나가던 2월 5일, 팻이 실종된 지 9일 만에 한 낚시꾼에 의해 죽음이 발견되는데 그의 몸엔 밧줄과 닷이 묶여 있었죠.
I was on my way in from the charter. I started to see what looked like a body, but I wasn't sure. And then it clicked. This is that school teacher. I noticed that he had some type of shirt, blue jeans, belt. This rope was wrapped around him. I mean, it was very well, intricately wrapped, underarm, around the neck. The rope went down the water, and there was a little bitty tiny anchor dug into the sand. The face, and there was no nose or face. It was just, looked like spaghetti. It's the best way I could describe it.
It was February 5th that I got a phone call saying that a body had been found. It was horrible.
When we first saw the body was fully clothed with the exception of one shoe, with
a rope and anchor tied around it. There were 6 separate exit perforations on the left side of the skull, what appeared to be one larger perforation on the right side. So this was clearly a pattern of a shotgun with some kind of buckshot in this case. We don't know if it was homicide or homicide. The arms were not bound up at all, so I consider the possibility that it occurred in this way.
My name is Lee Williams. I was an investigative reporter at the Herald Tribune in Sarasota. The sheriff's office said it was a suicide before Pat was even pulled from the water. They were trying to convince me to leave this one alone because it was a suicide.
The police side theory was that he tied that rope around himself, tied to this anchor, positioned himself on the edge of the stump knocker, shoots himself, went overboard. How would you get to that outcome?
Pat, he didn't really have the interest in them.
죽음에 묶인 밧줄과 산탄총의 흔적에도 경찰은 사건을 자살로 매듭지기로 했지만 팻은 절대로 자살할 만한 사람이 아니었습니다.
Pat and I were married in 1983. At the high school where he worked, he was really loved and respected by the kids because he cared. And he always got the children who needed that little bit extra, children who didn't have a father figure in their life.
He was excited for the future.
He wanted to be a grandfather so much. Pat was living a good life. He was vital, and he was close to retiring soon.
Another thing that didn't make sense is the way the rope was tied on him when he was found. They weren't knots that he would have chosen to use.
Why would you need to tie hands if perhaps he was killed beforehand? Pat would need to be unconscious or already gone to be wrapped like that.
몇 년이 흐르고 유가족은 경찰의 주장을 반박하기 위해 법의학 전문가에게 도움을 요청했고 그녀의 생각 또한 경찰의 주장과는 달랐습니다.
Professor of anthropology and forensics. He was shot with a shotgun, but he wasn't recovered on the boat. Just the idea of the way that he was wrapped within the ropes sounded really unusual.
두개골의 총상을 토대로 재현해 보았지만 스스로 총을 쏠 수 있는 각도도 아니었고 보트에서 혈흔 또한 발견되지 않았죠. 경찰의 주장은 도무지 합리적이지 않았습니다.
It would be almost impossible to do this and not get blood in the boat.
After the body was found, we did go back to Patrick's boat. Unfortunately, we didn't get any blood spatter.
Very challenging, even when you try to do something like this, to not leave any trace evidence. Absence of trace evidence, to me, makes it less likely that it occurred in the boat.
He clearly wasn't in that boat. There's zero biological evidence in there. It means that this was not a suicide. This is a murder.
There's absolutely did anything to his body while it was in the water for almost 10 days. After a gunshot wound to the head, there's so much blood that happens. And this is an area where there are lots of sharks. Even around here, there are alligators. Was he really in the water for 10 days?
In my humble opinion, Pat Mullins saw something out there in that boat of his that he wasn't supposed to see. Maybe because he went over as a good Samaritan and wanted to help somebody out.
If my dad saw somebody with a boat mechanical issue, I'm pretty sure he would approach and try to help them out.
So you'd have to ask yourself, what's worth taking a man's life for? Probably looking at somebody who was running drugs or some other type of contraband.
보트가 발견된 근처의 철교에 부착된 CCTV를 확인해 보기로 하지만 영상 데이터는 손상되어 확인할 수 없었습니다.
We obtained the video shortly after this incident happened. Unfortunately, the CXX personnel downloaded a corrupt video file.
I was definitely frustrated that was an immediate dead end because footage was so important to us.
It is frustrating. We have no facts, no answers, just theories.
이어 팻이 사망하고 유가족과 친하게 지내던 이웃 데이먼이 마치 죄책감을 느끼고 있는 듯 정말 이상한 언행들을 보이며 사람들의 의심을 자아냈죠.
After Pat's disappearance, Damon's behavior quickly became markedly different. Damon was very upset when Pat was missing and presumed dead.
Constantly asking, if something happened, would you still be my friend? And eventually, Damon intimated that he'd been using crystal meth.
He got more paranoid, impulsive.
The Memorial Day, after my dad had passed, the family and some extended friends got together, and Damon did come out, saw Damon tie a rope to his dog, tie that rope around himself.
Exact manner that it was on Pat's body. Extremely troubling.
그뿐만이 아니었습니다. 데이먼의 배에 보이는 빨간색 페인트들은 팻의 배에서 발견된 페인트와 너무나도 유사했고 데이먼은 주검이 발견된 곳에서 멀지 않은 곳에서 살고 있었죠.
That was just something that was like, maybe we ought to look into this.
The police really wanted to sample Damon's boat that they knew was red. They were declined by Damon.
It got to the point eventually he stopped talking to us.
After Damon passed away, his daughter did give permission paint chip to be taken from his boat, to the paint on the side of the stump knocker. The feedback we got from the police department was that, yes, it's a match. No, it's not important.
In reading the report that came back, the boat cannot be eliminated as a possible source of red paint smears on the victim's boat.
I feel Damon is aware of what happened to Pat. I think it was on the first year anniversary that I started doing flyers. We weren't getting any closer to an answer.
9 years later, I feel like someone out there is going to have some answers.
When I moved into that apartment, I immediately started having bizarre dreams. I could see a dungeon, and I saw a girl in there, and this weird couple. What I discovered was there's a person that went missing from that apartment. I think she wants to be found. I am a grandma and I'm a mom. I had my daughter in 1997 and I was a single mom and I moved to Chico, California. When I first got to Chico, I had seen a sign that said for rent and it said Walnut Garden apartment. We moved into the apartment number 14, January 31st, 2000. It's hard to explain, but when I first moved in, it didn't feel peaceful and it had this bizarre smell. And I say to myself, why are you feeling like this? Then the shit hit the fan. Hannah had this little pair of pink shoes. I always kept them by the doors.
I remember them being right in the middle of the bed. And my mom was like, did you put those there, Hannah? I'm like, no.
Like day after day, the shoes would be in the middle of the bed. There was like salt and pepper shakers. And in the morning when I'd wake up, they would be like at the very edge of the table. The other thing that was happening was I had these dreams that there was a girl walking down a street in Chico. During the dream, this man came behind her and put something over her mouth.
이어 어느 날 딸 해나가 마이리지라는 여성의 환영을 보며 여성과 대화를 나누기 시작했고 해나는 그녀의 모습을 생생히 기억하기까지 했죠.
I remember calling her My Liz, and I remember seeing her vividly.
그뿐만이 아니었습니다. 외출하고 돌아온 집에는 뭔가를 암시하듯 전화기가 묶인 채 떨어져 있었고 딸의 인형 또한 묶여 있었습니다.
I was shaken. I grabbed Hannah up, I scooped her up, and I ran out the front door. And so the police took a report. At their end of the phone, they're like, okay, lady, whatever. It all culminated into this one night in February of 2000. I woke up in the middle of the night, and then I hear white staticky TV noise. The cupboards were flapping open. All of a sudden, Ernie Doll's going, I feel great, like crazily. I feel great. So I take the batteries out of the doll.
And my mom freaking out because there was no batteries in it.
And then all of a sudden, boom, lights are all on. So I went to the neighbor who...
믿을 수 없는 기이한 현상이 계속되자 조디는 집을 나가 밤을 지새우게 되는데 이웃집 노인에 의해 이 집의 사연을 듣게 되죠.
We hightailed it out of there. So by now, it's about 6 o'clock in the morning. And I'm sitting out at the pool just crying. And then this older man who was walking his dog, he says, you know, Jody, nobody lives in that apartment very long. There was a girl who lived there in the apartment number 14. She's been missing ever since.
On January 31st, on Marie Elizabeth Spanicki, she went by the nickname Marliz. The missing persons report indicated she's a white female, 5'5", brown hair, 110 pounds. Her boyfriend indicated in the report he last seen her walking on Mangrove Avenue away from this flea market. No one had seen nor heard from Marie Elizabeth Spanicki.
Marliz was my sister. I was the oldest girl, and then Marliz was 3 years younger than me. She was very outgoing. She was very friendly.
1975년 배우가 되고 싶었던 말리즈는 동네 달건이 존 바로스를 따라 캘리포니아로 향하는데 말리즈는 존과의 다툼에 이어 캘리포니아에 적응하지 못하고 있었죠.
And then she wrote me a couple of times, and I think she was having trouble with John a little bit, you know, and she had nobody to run to, nobody to talk to. Marliz said she was coming home in April, and she never came home.
한편 조디의 꿈에선 말리즈에게 벌어진 일들이 보이기 시작했습니다.
My bizarre dream, weirder and stranger. Now I'm seeing a location, a couple, a young woman, and I could see that they were in a house. It looked kind of strangely like a dungeon. There was this like weird hook, like a really big logging hook. There was something around her arms, and then she had something on her mouth. Now all of a sudden they're doing sadistic and weird things to this girl. Of the things that happened in that apartment, I took my daughter and I moved. I only stayed in that apartment for like 3 months. We went to a different apartment in Chico. When I got out of there, I thought it was done. This was behind me. I ended up dating this guy. One day, he came across this book, The Perfect Victim. It's like, Jody, oh my God, you're not gonna believe this. There was a girl that had gone missing from my apartment. And he found an article about a missing girl, Liz. Hannah, when she was little, kept saying she was talking to somebody called Liz.
딸 해나가 어릴 적 대화하던 환영의 존재가 바로 실종된 말리지였던 것이었죠.
And then she showed me the picture of her. That is the girl that was in the apartment with us.
That was so freaky.
그 후 오랜 시간이 흘러 제니스 후커라는 여성의 충격적인 자백을 하게 되고 경찰관들은 해당 여성을 만나 이야기를 듣게 되는데 그녀는 말리지를 납치한 범인의 아내였던 것이었습니다.
Thing that I see when I get to the church and a woman named Janice Hooker. 1976, her husband Cameron had kidnapped and old a girl in Chico, California. Decided to grant immunity to Janice for her cooperation. Janice told me that the victim that they kidnapped in Chico was Marliz Spanicki. January 31st, 1976.
She was walking along. He offers the ride. He's there with his wife. It looks very safe. He was looking for who didn't have any ties to the community.
Cameron grabbed her with a knife to her throat, drug her back into the car, and they placed a head box over the top of her head.
The head box was constructed of wood and styrofoam, enclosed the head with this head box, and with that foam in there, basically prevented the person to be heard from any distance.
You'd be so disoriented, you wouldn't know what was going on. And then they drove about 40 miles all the way back to the house on Oak Street in Red Bluff.
They pulled up to the garage in the back of the house. The head box was off of her, and she was in a disoriented state. He said he had sprayed starting fluid into the rag, put that over Marliz's mouth to make her semi-unconscious. After getting out of the garage area, they carried her into the basement.
이어 캐머런은 말리지가 비명을 지르지 못하도록 성대를 자르려 했고 같은 피해자였던 제니스도 스톡홀름 증후군으로 캐머런을 돕기 시작했죠.
And Cameron threatened her that if she didn't help him, he was going to do the same thing to her. So she ultimately agreed and sat down next to Marliz in the bathroom floor. Marliz began bleeding heavily, so Cameron kind of got freaked out. Cameron lifted Marliz up and took her back down into the basement. Janice came down here after Cameron had cut her throat. She saw Marliz hanging from the beam. Janice said she felt that Cameron had strangled her with the rope and hung her by the beam, unclothed, with a pillowcase over her head. She was dead at that point in time.
Janice said they then carried the body back out to the car. They drove 30 miles north of Red Bluff on Interstate 5, where they turned off on a dirt road. Janice said Cameron dug a shallow grave and buried Marie Elizabeth Spanicki's body. After the burial, he burned all of her clothing, all of her belongings. So he kidnapped her, killed her, buried her, all within a half of a day.
캐머런의 범죄는 이뿐만이 아니었습니다. 말리지 실종 1년 후 친구의 동네에 깜짝 방문해 히치하이킹을 하던 콜린 스탠을 태워 똑같이 헤드박스를 씌운 후 납치했습니다.
Janice told us that Cameron kept Colleen as a hostage for 7 years. In 1984, Janice comes to Colleen and tells her that she's going to leave Cameron.
She has this period of time of years, almost 9 years, where she's trying to do what Cameron wants her to do and not get into trouble.
7년 후 제니스는 콜린과 도망치는 데 성공했고 이후 경찰관들은 생존자인 콜린에게서 말리지에 대한 정보를 얻을 수 있었습니다.
Well, everything you say matches what Janice told us. Do you know anything about this woman, Marliz?
하지만 제니스와 콜린의 증언뿐 어떠한 증거나 흔적도 남아있지 않은 상태였죠.
But to be able to continue with the side of Marliz, we needed Janice's cooperation.
They didn't have a body, they didn't have any evidence, they had nothing except Janice's testimony.
증거 없이 캐머런을 기소했다가 패소할 경우 더 이상 기소할 수 없게 되어 검사들은 신중했지만 말리지에 대한 범행 증거를 도무지 찾을 수 없게 되자 검사들은 일단 콜린의 사건으로 캐머런을 심판대에 올리게 됩니다.
Cameron Hooker went to trial for the and kidnapping of Colleen Stan.
It was such a sensational story to be kidnapped and held captive for over 7 years.
She was stripped, slashed with a leather whip.
He's more than capable of torturing somebody. I know because he did it to me. He's more than capable of murdering somebody.
She said Hooker chained her hand and foot, shocked her with electrical cord. The situation was perfect. Said she was a good slave.
Details that came out during that trial were just staggering, but none of that had to do with Marliz.
We were forbidden from mentioning Marliz or saying anything about her in the trial.
Cameron was convicted on 10 counts.
I consider this defendant to be probably the most dangerous psychopath in that he appears to be exactly the opposite of what he is.
And he was sentenced to 104 years.
Cameron was sent to prison. Colleen Stan case was resolved. The side of Maria Elizabeth Spanicky was still open.
He's in there for kidnapping and whatever else he did to Colleen, but what about my sister's murder?
그렇게 시간이 한참 흘러 2000년이 되고 조디에게 말리지의 사건들과 한영이 꿈에 나타나기 시작했던 것이었죠.
There was like a couple and they were kind of like stalking somebody or looking for somebody. And then I would always hear the number 35.76. I had no idea what that meant at all.
이 꿈들이 의미심장하게 느껴진 조디는 말리즈 사건을 조사했던 경찰에게 연락을 해 이렇게 말했습니다.
That she thought was related to Marliz's murder and potential gravesite.
정말 놀랍게도 경찰은 말리즈 사건 조사를 재개하려는 당일날 연락을 받게 되었고 조디에게 말리즈에 대한 정보를 얻어내는데 이는 제니스의 증언과 일치했습니다.
She told us that she was seeing the letter A and the numbers 17, as in A17, the area of going out 44, that is A17.
At the time you called us, we were searching an area where we feel she could be at. And you were envisioning this number, 35.76. And the number we came up with that mapping software was 35.77. All the elements that Janice gave us in her statement were on that road.
I feel like the spirit of Marliz was trying to get in touch with someone. And if I can help her, that's what I want to do.
하지만 말리지의 사건은 미제 사건으로 남게 되었고 사이코패스 캐머런은 2021년 가석방되어 주립병원에 있다고 합니다.
My son was my whole world.
They were just gone. There's nothing left. When I dream about my kids, sometimes they're in trouble and I have to get to them. For that moment, they're alive and they're with me. I love dreaming about my kids because they're actually there. I met Ahmed Kandil when I was 28 and he was 30. Ahmed grew up in Cairo. He's Muslim. We both came from a very middle-class upbringing, and so we had some of the same values. Ahmed and I knew each other a couple of years before we got married. My daughter, Amina, was born September 1st, 2003. And then my son, Bilal, was born in January 4th, 2006. Job in Boston, and then in the financial crisis, had lost his employment there. And
from that point, Ahmed did not ever
smiled less, and he was less positive. He really was not the same person that he was when I met him. So Ahmed and I separated in June of 2013.
아메드와 이혼 후 서로 시간을 쪼개가며 아이들을 키워가고 있었고 1년 후 아이들과 함께 여행을 간 아메드는 그 후로 그녀의 앞에 나타나지 않았습니다.
I watched them driving off. That was the last time I saw my kids.
아이들이 돌아오기로 한 9월 1일이 되어도 아무 소식도 전해지지 않자 그녀는 서둘러 학교에 전화를 해보았죠.
But I called both schools in the morning. They told me that they weren't there and they hadn't shown up that day. At that point, I got really concerned, just hurt and really concerned about the kids. And then I called Ahmed's father in Egypt. I asked him where Ahmed was and what had happened. He didn't know what I was talking about. I wasn't concerned, which concerned me. And that to me was a real warning sign that he must have known something.
When I went to the house, there were no cars. Nobody was home. The windows were blocked. There was a curtain that was pulled aside. I called Rebecca and I told her the house is completely empty.
The bottom just fell out and I was in a free fall.
그렇게 약 한 달 후 경찰에게 받은 아메드의 비행 기록은 정말 충격적이었습니다. 아메드는 캐나다가 아닌 여러 공항을 경유해 터키의 이스탄불로 간 것이었죠.
The FBI became involved with the case in September 2014. Federal arrest warrant was issued for Ahmed by the Eastern District of Virginia for 2 counts of international parental kidnapping.
When I looked through bank records and credit card records from the FBI, that frightened me.
아메드는 산속에 있는 생존주의자 캠프에 갔었고 총 쏘는 방법을 배우기도 했습니다. 이는 분명히 국경을 넘어가기 위한 준비 같았죠.
Created new identities. These are all possibilities, and potentially that's a reason they can't be tracked.
Hired 3 different private investigators, contacted congressmen and senators. Until September of 2015, I received an email that was simply called "Kids Are Okay. We live on a small farm and they are loving it. Just wanted to let you know that they are well well and doing great. And I wasn't going to wait till you find a job somewhere and take full custody of them. So once they're old enough and can distinguish right from wrong, they will contact you. It originated in that same area in Turkey. Amina's email address had previously been checked. I got the contact of a Turkish detective looking for the kids there, looking for the IP address. Yeah, we were able to recover. And then I found out that Ahmed applied for an Egyptian ID card in 2016. I really wanted to go to Egypt, but I've been intently warned against going there. Not protected overseas.
Makes things a lot more challenging because specifically in Egypt, parental kidnapping is not considered a crime.
There's really no recourse.
아미나와 벨렐 외에도 미국에서는 해마다 수천 명의 아이들이 부모에 의해 유괴되고 있고 이와 비슷한 사건들이 정말 많다고 합니다.
And that day changed my life.
Aziz was the greatest blessing to our family.
Aziz's mother, Rabia, was born in Columbus, Georgia. Her family's originally from India and Pakistan. We met in Alabama when we were in school. She's a very strong personality. For someone who also has a strong personality, we were attracted to each other. Over the course of a few years, we realized that we wanted to get married. When Aziz was first born, we actually lived with my parents in New Orleans. But, Rabia had a hard time getting along with them, and, it was very clear that we couldn't live in the house. As Aziz grew older, we started having lots of problems. Fighting was almost daily. So in April of 2014, we decided to separate. Requested that she go back to Atlanta because that's where her family's support was. And she made it seem like, hey, we're still working on this marriage. Let's try to make this work.
And then after several months, out of left field, Abdul was served with divorce papers.
Rabia would put up hindrances and roadblocks trying to stop me from seeing Aziz.
It seems that during that whole period, she was meeting with lawyers. And then once she filed divorce papers, Rabia blocked Abdul from seeing Aziz. The divorce was finalized in 2015.
And it was right about a year later when the custody evaluators recommended that I get primary custody of Aziz, and I was going to get full custody for Aziz. We were to meet on November 28, 2017 in an Atlanta courtroom, and that's when all the restrictions were going to be lifted. We get to the Atlanta courtroom, we're waiting for our case. The judge shows up, and Rabia's not there. We waited several hours thinking or hoping that there was a delay. I left the courthouse and I didn't have my son.
그렇게 예상치도 못하게 라비아가 아지즈를 데리고 감쪽같이 사라져버리고 뒤늦게 경찰에 신고를 하는 압둘카는 그녀의 재혼 소식까지 알게 됩니다.
It was confusing, and Abdul was terrified. He always said that the nights were the toughest for him. We thought Rabia was crazy. We thought she was vindictive. We never thought that Rabia was capable of this.
We hired Private Eye in Atlanta, in New Orleans, and other places around the country to find any information about Aziz. Finally, after 2 years, the court gave a felony kidnapping warrant against Rabia for the abduction of Aziz. Once there was a felony kidnapping warrant against Rabia, the U.S. Marshals got involved in the case.
And the U.S. Marshals' involvement was about 3 years or so behind the actual disappearance. Rabia's mother and father, they were being evasive during questioning where their grandchild was or where Elliot was located. They just referred everything to their attorney.
I found out that this was something that Rabia and Elliot planned out. They both shut down their cell phones, closed their bank accounts, closed all their social media, and they disappeared. We've done everything that we can think of. Outside of, when they sold their cars in 2017, we have yet to find any credible link to them in any way. That's what makes this so hard. When Aziz disappeared, time literally stopped. So to me, he left yesterday. I'm gonna keep fighting till I see him.
안녕하세요, 덕봉입니다. 오늘의 영상 2020년에 공개된 넷플릭스 오리지널 시리즈 풀리지 않은 미스터리 3부였습니다. 실제 사건들을 종합해 만든 다큐멘터리 시리즈였는데요. 초자연적 현상뿐 아니라 미스터리로 남은 사건들을 심층적으로 탐색하는 시리즈인 만큼 다큐멘터리를 좋아하지 않으신다면 꽤나 불호일 수도 있을 것 같습니다. 저는 다큐를 좋아하는지라 정말 흥미롭게 봤는데요. 실제 피해자들, 목격자, 증인들의 진술과 인터뷰가 담긴 만큼 정말 시간 가는 줄 모르고 봤습니다. 각 회차마다 50분 내외로 진행되는 짧은 러닝타임인 만큼 킬링타임으로도 정말 추천드리고 밥친구로도 정말 추천드리는 시리즈입니다. 풀리지 않은 미스터리 추천드리면서 오늘 영상 여기서 마치겠습니다. 재밌게 보셨다면 구독과 좋아요 부탁드립니다. 댓글도요. 제발 항상 건강하시길 바라겠습니다.